hope to avoid a repeat of the violence that marred the 2010 balloting, which sparked a civil war that killed about 3,000 people and clashes that followed Ouattara's 2020 re-election to a third term that Gbagbo and Bede said was unconstitutional. Ouattara has not yet said whether he plans to run for a fourth term in 2025. He has said he would like to step down, but also suggested he would need Gbagbo and Bede to commit to withdrawing from politics in order to do so. The West African nation of civilian casualties in Togo from a spreading Islamist insurgency in the region. Togolese experts say efforts are needed to discourage disaffected youth along the border from being recruited by militants. Matteo Francini, Kofi, reports from Togo's capital, Lomé.
Authorities in Togo are working to prevent their small West African nation from becoming the next country in the region to struggle with the violent, spreading Islamist insurgency. Saturday's deadly explosion could mark a turning point if it's confirmed that the 7 miners killed were the first civilian casualties in the conflict. Togo's military did not immediately confirm the cause, but local media reported the victims were killed when an improvised explosive device went off. In June, Togo declared a state of emergency in its northern Savane region after Islamist militants attacked near the border with Burkina Faso in May, killing 8 troops and wounding 13. They were the first ever recorded deaths from terrorism in Togo. Fighting in Burkina Faso and Mali claimed the responsibility for the attack. But Togo authorities are also concerned that Islamists are recruiting disaffected youth for domestic terrorism and have formed the Inter-Ministerial Committee for the Prevention and Fight Against Violent Extremism, CIPLEV. Urobosicha Kondo is the committee's rapporteur. He says the group exists to capitalize on the thoughts and requests of the local population. Chakondo says he centralizes information and sends it to a committee of ministries that analyzes it and delivers its conclusions to the government. He says his group aims to find and study the vulnerabilities that can attract a citizen, or more specifically, young people, to violent extremism. While there are no confirmed reports of Togolese being recruited by insurgents, analysts say dealing with the emergence of terrorism means going beyond security operations. Michel Douty is an independent security expert working with Togo's Committee Against Extremism. He says Togolese security forces have the men and the women necessary for the fight against violent extremism. Security forces and the local population.
To instrumentalize the porosity of powder to go to that country, but also pose explosive devices. In Benin, we have a number of attacks that were staged with improvised explosive devices. But beyond attack at the ISS, what we have been doing is actually to look at the expression of violent extremism beyond what we see as attack, because that is only the tip of the iceberg.
The Togolese government is also working with Western partners and Gulf states to train their military and fund projects to help locals. Matteo Fraschini-Coffi for VOA News, Lomé, Togo.
You're listening to African News Tonight. I'm Yeheyes Wuhib in Washington. Please note we have moved our programs from voanews.com to voaafrica.com. There you'll find all your favorite VOA radio and TV programs and a whole lot more. Find us on voaafrica.com. The World Health Organization is calling for action to stem the growing spread of deadly infections such as monkeypox and Ebola between animals and humans in Africa. Lisa Schlein reports from Geneva.
A new WHO analysis finds zoonotic outbreaks on the African continent have increased by 63% from 2012 to 2022, compared to the previous decade. Globally, the WHO says more than 60% of human infectious diseases and more than 75% emerging infectious diseases are caused by pathogens found in wild or domestic animals. It says those diseases sicken about 1 billion people and kill millions every year. WHO's Regional Director for Africa, Matshidiso Moeti, says zoonotic diseases pose a severe threat in Africa. In the past decade, she says outbreaks of the animal-transmitted illnesses accounted for 1 in 3 confirmed public health events in the region.
A deeper dive reveals that Ebola and similar hemorrhagic fevers constitute nearly 70% of these outbreaks. The remainder include, among others, monkeypox, dengue fever, anthrax, and plague. Although there's been a notable increase in monkeypox cases since April this year, compared to the same period in 2021, the positive news is the numbers are still lower than for the 2020 outbreak peak.
So far this year, the health agency has reported more than 2,000 suspected cases of monkeypox. Of those, only 203 have been confirmed. Most cases and deaths are among males with an average age of 17. Moeti notes infections originating in animals have been jumping to humans for centuries, but the risk of mass infections and deaths has been relatively limited in Africa.
As rising urbanization encroaches on the natural habitats of the continent's wildlife and a demand for food from an especially fast-growing population burgeons, the risk is heightened. The addition of improved road, rail, and air links, which remove the natural barrier that poor transportation infrastructure provided, opens the way for the spread of zoonotic disease outbreaks from remote to urban areas.
Moeti says Africa cannot be allowed to become a hotspot for emerging infectious diseases. She says a so-called all-hands-on-deck approach is needed to counter the threat. She says experts in human, animal, and environmental health must work together with communities to prevent and control zoonotic outbreaks from spreading across the continent. Lisa Schlein for VOA News, Geneva.
Economists say several crises are converging to plunge Africa into what some are calling a debt disaster that can cause even more poverty on the continent. Fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic, soaring food and fuel prices, the ravages of climate change, and economic aftershocks of the war in Ukraine are combining to hit countries that were already struggling. Darren Taylor explains.
The International Monetary Fund warns that richer countries trying to control spiraling inflation by hiking interest rates could also trigger a debt crisis in developing countries. The IMF says a lot of African countries struggled to pay their debt during the pandemic, while getting even deeper into the red as their economies shrank. Financial analysts say at least 60% of Africa is in debt distress. One campaign policy officer, Olawunmi Olabusari, says several factors are driving debt spikes. These include rising food insecurity, worsened by more unemployment caused by pandemic lockdowns, and disruption to supply chains of staples such as wheat, maize, and sunflower oil because of the war in Eastern Europe.
In 2021, there were 193 million people in urgent need of food assistance. Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we have over 40 million people more that are experiencing hunger. We also then have droughts, the effects of droughts, for example, in the Horn of Africa, experiencing some of the worst droughts and therefore depleting the
movement that also aims to end Africa's debt crisis. Olabusari says debt-ridden African governments couldn't have planned for a worldwide pandemic followed by a war sending shockwaves across the planet.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine has sort of taken us out of the frying pan and into the fire. Really, it's affecting our daily lives because of the interdependent nature of globalization. So Russia and Ukraine supply about 50% of Africa's wheat imports. And for certain countries, including Eritrea, Egypt, Benin, Sudan, Djibouti, Tanzania, over 70% of wheat imports.
She says the continent must take immediate, significant action against food insecurity.
This means committing to avoiding export bans on key commodities. So we've seen Russia We've seen Ukraine put export restrictions on food. And even African countries, including Nigeria and Egypt, have also introduced export restrictions. But if we all close in, then we leave less for our neighbors. We need to remember to not only think of ourselves, because that makes the situation worse.
Olabusari says economic crises always strike the poorest hardest.
Countries need to target subsidies and social protection to the most vulnerable. Before the pandemic, women were 6% more likely than men to experience hunger. But at the height of the pandemic, it was 10%. Now, they are also being hit harder. And for low-income households for whom food makes up a larger portion of their consumption expenditure, they have lost some other essentials, such as education, even transport, which is now also skyrocketing. So we really need to
Under these conditions, she says, African governments often have no option but to tighten the debt noose strangling their countries.
In the long run, what is important is that we fund the economic recovery of African countries, that we stop the debt crisis. Right now, so many African countries are experiencing debt distress. They're struggling to pay off their sovereign debts. And so we need to see the international community and multilateral development banks make it easier to access special drawing rights and other forms of liquidity, and to apply for debt restructuring through the G20 carbon framework. So we need to see some reform that really keeps the competing priorities of developing countries in mind.
One campaign also wants richer countries, even though they're also facing recessions, to pour more money into the World Food Programme. For VOA News, I'm Darren Taylor in Johannesburg.
A championship belt given by American boxer Sugar Ray Leonard to South Africa's President Nelson Mandela has been stolen. Vicky Stark reports.
Sugar Ray Leonard's World Boxing Council Championship belt, said to be worth close to $3,000, was a treasured possession of South African President Nelson Mandela. South African police announced Thursday the belt was taken during a July 1 break-in at Mandela's Soweto House Museum, where it was on display. Colonel Dimakatso Selo is a police spokeswoman. There are currently no suspects arrested and the police are investigating. Anyone who may have information about this incident is requested to contact the police. All information received will be treated as strictly confidential. No other items were reported missing from the museum. Mandela's private secretary of 20 years, Alda Lafranje, says the American world champion boxer gave Mandela the belt during a visit to South Africa.
I just know that it was very valuable to him. Whenever he could, he watched boxing, and because it was a sport in which he participated himself also, he really admired people who aspired to the discipline of boxing. So he was a great fan of Sugar Ray Leonard, and Sugar Ray and him met on a few occasions, so I think it was very sentimental to him as well.
The Franje was present on 2 of those occasions. She says they joked around a lot.
Both of them had a great sense of humor, but they talked about the big matches in the past, like Muhammad Ali and so on.
Mandela himself, a former amateur boxer, wrote in his biography, Long Walk to Freedom, that he did not enjoy the violence of boxing so much as the science of it. Lefranje, who's written a memoir called Good Morning, Mr. Mandela, has called on South Africa's government to better secure the museum in the township of Soweto in Johannesburg.
It is disappointing, really. I mean, you can't think that someone would take something so personal of his, an icon in South Africa, someone steals his legacy. I'm disgusted by it.
Madiba, as Mandela is affectionately known, was jailed for 27 years for opposing South Africa's oppressive apartheid government. Mandela first moved into the house in 1945, and his former wife, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, continued to live there until 1996. Mandela was released from prison in 1990 and died in 2013. His fellow Nobel Peace Prize winner, Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu, who died last year, lived on the same street called Vilakazi, which today draws many tourists. Vicky Stark for VOA News, Cape Town, South Africa.
Thanks for listening to VOA Africa. I'm Yegis Wuhib in Washington.
Friends, we can all listen to the Sunny Side of Sports. Right here on the Voice of America. Voice of America! Sporty greetings to all our Voice of America listeners. This is VOA Sunny Young in Washington. Welcome to the July 14th edition of the Sunny Side of Sports. Let's give a Sunny Side of Sports salute to the national women's football teams from Morocco and Zambia, which have both qualified for their maiden Women's World Cup. They did so by winning their quarterfinal matches Wednesday at the Africa Women's Cup of Nations tournament in Morocco. Zambia beat Senegal 4-2 on penalty kicks after extra time finished 1-1 in Casablanca. Goalkeeper Hazel Nali was the heroine for the Copper Queens of Zambia. Hazel scored the winning spot kick for the Zambian women after saving one herself. And in the capital, Rabat, the Moroccan women delighted a big partisan crowd by beating Botswana 2-1. For reaction to the Morocco-Botswana game, Iron Mike Mbonye spoke with the Nairobi-based sports journalist Lokadere Natiom.
This was one exciting game if there ever was one. Morocco came in swinging right from the jump, and with that first goal from Sanaa Masudi, tucked in very comfortably past Botswana's goalkeeper, was one to start the game on a high. Of course, the fan energy, it's something you can call a home advantage for Morocco, because probably they've played on this ground before, and they had their fans there cheering them on just to get to the semi-finals or the World Cup in 2023. And you could tell that Botswana were having fun from the get-go, because even after Morocco scored their first goal, they were not intimidated by that first goal, and they came in equalizing just a few minutes later to show them that, we have faced some of the toughest teams in Africa, including Nigeria and South Africa, and now we're not afraid of you, who are now competing for the third time at the Africa Women's Cup of Nations. So I was on the edge of my seat the whole time, and also smiling the whole time, because the energy of this game was just incredible. Even the coaches, you could see that they were worried throughout the game, because the players really were putting their best foot forward, and you could see that the communication between the Moroccan players was really, really superb this time, because they have been resting for 5 days since their last match. And of course, I think that has been a great addition to what they were able to do at this quarterfinal match against Botswana. Botswana, I think, have had a very steady growth since 2019, qualifying for the COSAFA event for the first time. And of course, last year when they beat South Africa, infamously, they beat South Africa at the World Cup, at the Olympic, Tokyo Olympic qualifiers, which was very, very key for them in terms of building themselves as one of the best teams or upcoming teams in Africa. So it was great to see Botswana playing their best foot forward and just anticipating for what everyone else in the continent is anticipating for, because we do not want the usual winners from the past Africa Women's Cup of Nations. So this was truly a match that will go down in history for learning lessons, things that will be coming up in the next championships in the next years, because we saw a great deal of midfield play, which was where the power was held, balls being controlled from that point, and a lot of free kicks that have earned both teams good points, and of course the goals. So it was exciting to see both teams bringing their best foot forward, and we hope for the best when it comes to the semi-finals.
Botswana made her debut in the Women's AFCON. What's your assessment of the team from the group to quarter-final stage?
When Botswana, Mike, was playing Burundi, we could see that they were excited to get to this level of competition, or put up a better performance in the semi-finals. So I'm hoping for the best from Botswana, and now I'm actually rooting for them. I didn't think I'd root for Botswana, but I'm actually rooting for them to either get to the final or even qualify for the World Cup.
Do you think there will be new teams in the continent to emulate Botswana's exploits in the next edition of Women's AFCON?
Mike, there will definitely be new teams in the continent that will emulate Botswana's exploits in the next edition of the Africa Women Cup of Nations. I am hoping that Kenya will this time get to that level. I mean, the team that we had this year, despite the push and pull between the government and FIFA, I think we had one of the best teams, and I think what Botswana have shown is what Kenya would have done at the Africa Women Cup of Nations. I'm hoping that in the next competition, Mike, that Kenya will get to emulate or even put up a better performance than Botswana, because we have a team that has been built for a very long time, since 2018, the last competition, and have had great experiences in the Olympic qualifiers, CECAFA Championship here in the East African region. And of course, our players every year get a chance to play in the European leagues. And of course, the CAF Women's Champions League, I think, will play a big part in empowering teams like Kenya and Tanzania, and even teams like South Sudan, who are still fairly low when it comes to women's football. And I think we will be able to emulate, if not do better than Botswana, in the upcoming competitions.
That's sports journalist Luca Dare Natiom, and she spoke with Iron Mike Mbonye on the telephone from Nairobi, Kenya. The Moroccan women will next play the winner of Thursday's Nigeria-Cameroon quarterfinal in Casablanca in the semifinals. And the Zambian women will next play the winner of Thursday's South Africa-Tunisia quarterfinal in the semifinals. And while Botswana and Senegal lost their matches on Wednesday, they still have a chance of qualifying for the 2023 Women's World Cup. On Sunday, July 17th, they'll play the losers of Thursday's quarterfinal matches, and the winners on Sunday advance to Interconfederation playoffs. Playoffs that will determine more World Cup qualifiers.
Hello, listeners. My name is Majid Alexander. I'm a former Crested Crane captain, former national team Crested Crane coach, and now a CAF coaches instructor. Listen to Sunny Side of Sports on Voice of America.
How did former Crested Cranes captain and coach Majda Nantanda get her start playing football? That's the question Magume Davis Rakawenge posed to her.
It wasn't easy as it is now, because before, when I was still playing those days, as women or girls, we were not allowed to play the game. But I got a chance of playing with my brothers who were always involved in the game, with those community boys, because I was good at it. So for me, I grew up playing football just because the boys wanted me to play on their teams, and being that I was talented. So I'm among the few girls who grew up playing football just because of my talent.
Yeah. And first of all, you eventually played for the national team, the Uganda Crested Cranes, consequently representing Uganda at the famous 2000 finals in South Africa. How was it?
It was a very good experience, and as a leader, because by then I was the captain of the team, though I wasn't the captain for the field because I tried to give it to my senior player, Oliver Mbekika, but I was the captain, the full captain of the team. It was a very good experience because as women, we just played football without knowing what is happening. All of a sudden qualifying for that top continental championship, like we got excited and it's like, this is our chance. And then we started feeling why, and then actually making us, consoling ourselves, or maybe this is why we played football, because by then we were never paid, we're just doing for our own with passion. Right now, who I am today is that experience I got in 2000, because I got to interact with the Nigerians, whom I used to admire as role models, the South Africans, and now my friends, and when I meet them, so it gave me that chance of seeing things beyond, not only to be a player, but just to think, what will I do when I retire from the game?
Actually, talking about that brings me to you, from being a captain, from playing for the national team, eventually coach the national team. How did you achieve that?
How I came into, like in 2007, FIFA wanted to, like there was a youth coaching course, so it was FIFA sponsored. So FIFA told them, had a condition, if you want this course to happen, because FIFA had brought over 50 coaches, youth coaches, so they said at least you need to involve women. So by then I was still playing, so the federation told one of the coaches, the person who was to be with us, go and get for us 5 good players from the national team. Being that I was the captain, he just came and said, hey Majida, being the captain, automatic, get your other 4 players, you should pick those who are better. Tomorrow, like on Monday, I have to go to FIFA and attend a coaching course. Don't mind, because I never thought about being a coach. I never wanted, because no one told me in the first place you can be a coach. So it was all about play football, be the right midfielder, keep that position. So during the last closing ceremony, with FIFA instructor Fig from Germany, he said, I'd like to recognize one of the coaches, good, like one of the best participants. So I went in front and started saying anything like, this young woman, if helped, and the federation people were there, the technical director and the federation president, if helped, she can be a better player, a better coach in the future. So I helped her, and then she gave me a FIFA badge. After that, then there was, CAF was, I think, had an invitation telling all federations select 2 women. They must have played for the national team, and they must have attended a coaching course. The same year, I attended the coaching course, so that's when I went to South Africa for CAF. And when I went to reach the CAF, I thought, okay, we want to mentor you to become better coaches and instructors in future. So that happened when I came back. I said I've retired, and that's why I took up coaching.
So actually retired from active football when you're still young.
Exactly. But because of that experience, first with the FIFA instructor, and then going to CAF course in 2007, and seeing the role model like Frank Smith, seeing all the people, and they're talking about coaching and how they want to develop women coaches in Africa, and also to become instructors. When I came back, so when I said I need to retire, I can still play.
The Game for Girls Foundation, which is the organization. Tell us more about it. How do you come with this organization, and how has it helped you achieve your dream of promoting women football?
In 2010, a group of Americans came to Uganda. Actually, they were at Old Kampala Secondary School, and they wanted to train over 200 coaches. So I happened to be among the 200 coaches. More of them were women, only 40 women. So one of the ladies was Lisa Bag from the US. She was the assistant. Like, I came to Uganda, I was looking for people like you. Do you exist in the US? So that's when I got a chance to go for my exchange program in the US. So I told them my story. And then when they said, what do you want? I said, like, whatever I've told you, you came to Uganda looking for us, but we are somewhere hidden. No one even told you that the women are playing football. People used to take her to the men's team. So I want to be the change that I want to see. So with that, Lisa said, I can help you do that. So we came up with that, me and Lisa.
Growing the game for girls.
Exactly. To use my experience as a former woman playing soccer, to see that there's a change in all women and girls in Uganda from now until that, using my experience, and then because I know that if I used to play, some of my colleagues used to drop out of school, so like, how can I use football? How can these girls use football to come and or attend education, talk about issues like rape, early pregnancy, drug use and abuse, all the experience that I had, all the experience that I saw when I was playing, so what I want to use that. So till now it has done a lot of things, a very good project, and also supported by Global Sports Mentorship Program. It's the US Department of State program, because that's where I was mentored, and all whatever I do through mentorship is because of them. So it's my project. I have passion. I do it for free. I go to communities. I gather women. I gather men. I gather girls. Because I'm a former footballer, I attract them with my tricks, and then I talk to parents. When you see that girl playing, allow her to play. Maybe she can be a doctor in future.
That's Majda Nantanda, the former captain and coach of Uganda's national women's football team. And she spoke with Magume Davis Rakawinj in Kampala, Uganda. And we'll hear part 2 of their conversation on Friday's Sunny Side of Sports. Germany's top flight Bundesliga kicks off on August 5th. And one of the footballers looking forward to the new season is Werder Bremen defender Felix Agu. The 22 22-year-old Agu is the son of a German mother and a Nigerian father. In an interview with Clubina Quicksilver Ofori, Felix talked about his family and his fledgling professional football career.
A young man from Osnabrück. My mom has always lived in Osnabrück. I was born and raised there. My dad came from Nigeria to Germany. I grew up in Osnabrück. I stayed there. I was, I think, 20 years old. Then I moved to Bremen. I started playing football at the age of, I don't know, since I can think. Because my dad and uncles, everybody used to play football back in the days, or still play football like me. So that's how I got into football. And yeah, ever since I can think, like, the ball was in my life.
In every player's life, the parents play a major role, driving you to the training grounds for the youth teams and all that. And could you please tell me the particular role your parents played during your juvenile football period?
Yeah, they played a big role. I think, like, for most young players, like, not only the support they gave you by driving you to the training facility, by, I don't know, making sure you get everywhere in time, you know, supporting you at the games and stuff, but also at home, keeping it a safe place so you can, like, come back even if you have had a bad game. They're still there to support you, and yeah, important for you to keep a clear head.
Felix, at the age of 19, you were invited to the German national under-21 team. How was the feeling like?
It was an honor, for sure, when I got the call, but it was also at the same time very overwhelming because everything went kind of quick. Because the season before, we played with Osnabrück in the 3rd division in Germany, and we got promoted to the 2nd league. But during the season in the 3rd league, I was playing like maybe 50% of the games, so I wasn't like a starting player all the time. So I was playing out in the 3rd division. So when we got promoted, I was like, okay, let's just see how the season plays out. And then, yeah, I played a good preseason, and all of a sudden I found myself in the starting 11 in the first matches. And then it was like, yeah, I played some pretty good games. And always when you're young, playing like in a good league, then also the national teams get like aware of you. And that's when I got a call from the coach. And yeah, then I was like very happy. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, yeah, it was also a kind of difficult decision because like there was just a few days in between when I also got a call from, they also asked me to play for the Super Eagles for the upcoming international break. And then yeah, it was like a few days where I was like, okay, what should I do? I would love to play for Nigeria, but I also would love to play for Germany. I've never even played in the national team, so I was like, okay. And then I was like, let's just start with the under-21s of Germany, like in a more familiar setting, where it's more known, where I might, and yeah, also because it wasn't a fixed decision. So when I would have gone to the Super Eagles, it would have been okay. Now I have to stick with this decision, and now I can still decide whether.
What convinced you to stand for Werder Bremen after your long stay with Osnabrück?
I had a pretty good development in Osnabrück. I've been there since I was 10 or 11 years old. Played there for 2 seasons with the first team, and then it was like I played a good season in the 2nd league. I got called up to the under-21s, and I felt like I was ready for the next step in my career. And I also felt like this would be like at some other place in Osnabrück. And yeah, that's when Bremen came into play and offered me to play for them. Mm-hmm. For me, it was the starting point to play for Werder Bremen was, for one, that it was kind of close to Osnabrück, and that I still could keep like my friends around. And also that it's like a very family-like club, that it's everybody's treating each other well in the club. It's also professional, but you know, at the same time, everybody is kind of close, you know. And also with the fans and the big tradition this club has, it was in the end a kind of easy decision to come here.